So we have the wall around, and we are standing basically now in that house here. We are on that building, the courthouse, the courtyard, and we were visiting this house down below. So this is what we consider the military commander lodging and command, the warehouses, bathhouse, the law. Genius water system built by Herod the Great. And as library study, we found some models of that here. And of course, this is where we are. Now look at this balcony. Imagine, so from 10 o'clock in the morning, that high area giving you shade. And noontime it gives you the shade, this direction, until 4 o'clock, until this direction. That means what? You have here the highest ground, beautiful view, nice wind. Even in a dead summer when it is 120 degrees, there's a nice breeze coming through that gap of the Masada River. And you catch it here on that balcony. So he was such a great planner, or his engineers, I don't know, but he was genius in that way, okay? Water coming from there in huge velocity. Upstream, some of the water diverted into by a dam, maybe 20, 25, 30 degrees, bringing the water into a water aqueduct, this water aqueduct. And then on the mountainside, Herod the Great dug the upper tunnel, 1, 2, 3, 8, below 4. Size of them 30 by 30 by 30 feet. Huge. And this is the top tip. So it was covered. 68. So Joseph was right that when the rebellion ended up in the Galilee, the Roman soldiers walked down, as we drove down, in the valley and sacked Jericho in the year 68. By the way, the people of Qumran, that they knew about it, 10 miles south of it, they were sacked also a few days later. But the Romans did not know about this place. They went up to Jerusalem like we drove yesterday, or actually in that valley which I was talking about. People that maybe close to the Essenes or the Dead Sea called, but they did build it in the direction of Jerusalem. The colonnade, okay, this is the direction. This is Jerusalem, it's over there. That room is, I don't know if I told it, every synagogue, they have a treasury. Whenever you have a Bible book which is damaged, or something it is old enough to use, they don't burn it or bury it, they put it in a treasury. And this was a scribe, sometimes if they have a scribe in that community, would sit and write new Bibles, and it is in that room. Divided the inner walls into rooms, like you see here, and each family had a privacy, semi-privacy, to live their own life. Remember, we're talking about 957 people. And if you stand here and you look at the headquarters of Flavio Silva camp, you know, it's so quiet here, you can really converse. They could have conversed with each other. So Joseph was right, and you see part of it in the movie, that nothing to do. So this is when Joseph was right, that the leaders of the rebels and the men convened and decided not to fall alive into the hand of the Romans. And it is not in a movie, what you've seen is just a little bit of the groomer description of what went on there. If you read the book, it says that each man said goodbye to his wife, kissed his kids and wives and children, embraced them, and then he pulled his head back and cut their throat. And each man, after doing that, the family lay down on the gravel, and he laid between them, hugged them, and his commander slit his throat. And the 10 last commanders drew lots. Who will do whom? And the last commander, the winner of that lottery, went down to the lower palace, put everything aflame, and fell on his sword. This is how it described. Now imagine what happened. We are digging in the lower palace, in that little bathhouse which I show you on a model. 3 skeletons discovered there. One, shall we educate our kids to do that in case that things seems to be close by to end? And we had a second thought about that. So swearing in is done some other places, but we still bring our soldiers here maybe twice in the service to tell them the story and visit the site, because we want everybody to have that and preserve that sense of bravery that has been displayed here. 73 to 106. After 33 years, they probably said to themselves, what the heck we're doing here? You know, it's a no man's land, it's hot like crazy, let's get the heck out of here. So how we know 106? Because of the latest coin found here, 106. And it was completely abandoned. Now what happened here is really amazing, because early Christianity, Byzantine period, I don't know if you're aware of it, at about 5th century, 4th, 5th, 6th century even, there was a movement to leave the corrupt towns like Alexandria, Jerusalem, and Damascus, and leave the corrupt cities to the remote places in a desert. And monks left and built monasteries in a desert to live close to God in pure air, just like the Essenes did hundreds of years before. You position legs of a chair or very comfortable sofa, burned. It was full with ashes. We analyzed, we found the type of the wood, I forgot the name of it, it's not local, indicating it was very expensive imported furniture. Maybe the throne of Herod the Great. So imagine him entertaining people there. Then when they concluded business, they come through the door to the bathhouse. Antipater governor and his 3 sons, sub-governors, if you like. So Herod the Great, when he was very young, 17 or 18, he was the governor of Jerusalem, okay? The Parthians on the other side of the mountains incited people to rebel against the Romans. And they created, with Antigonus, the Hasmonean king, a rebellion in Jerusalem. They kicked Herod the Great out of Jerusalem. He escaped Jerusalem, ran down toward Bethlehem, and then to the desert. And this is when he decided, and he escaped here, arrived here with his wife and his brothers and family. They almost died of thirst. But then the rain came here and they survived. He was not the king yet. He went from here to Egypt. Cleopatra helped him to go to Rome, where he convinced the Senate to pronounce him as a king, and he gathered enough army, came and landed in the north and took down and put down the rebellion. And this is when he became the king of Israel. He remembered that experience, so he built here a safe house, a place he couldn't really escape, and fortified himself within the walls and water cistern and full of food in the warehouses. You understand? Mm-hmm. So he built this about 30 before Christ, 35. This is capers. 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 Now the capers that you eat with the fish or with the lax or with whatever you eat it with, these are the buds. It's not the fruit, the buds before they open up. So the buds, this is what you really, people picking up and salting. And naturally they open up later for a beautiful flower that lasts 24 hours, maybe 1 day, purple and white. And then after it's gone, the fruits start to grow, and the fruit is not that edible. It is really the strongest plant in the land. No matter what you do to it, you chop it, you cut it, you burn it, come springs, it kicks back. It's unkillable. But what I want to share with you is how it's been used by the shepherds for thousands of years to save their goat and sheep. Okay? It grows everywhere in Israel. It's very powerful, but it has a purpose for the shepherds. You know, shepherds used to be growing or going from one grazing place to another, one well to another. Wells contain usually stale water. Little insects go there, among them leeches. Now, what happened when the goat drink, or the sheep drinks the leeches, or the water with the microscopic leeches, as they pass their throat, they send their claws and they're starting to suck the blood. And slowly they grow. The more they suck, they're more big, and they grow so much that they block passage of food, water, or air. And they're dying, that's it. 50 years ago, they had the penicillin. Maybe today they have the antibiotics. Before that, they had this. So they would look for a branch, straighter branch that I found, and I'm going to demonstrate what they've been doing. They're taking off the side branches. Okay. It has some very vicious thorns, as you can see.
Demonstrate on camera.
Yes. Okay. Anybody has a knife? Oh, gee. Really tough ones. No, you didn't. Wait. Patient. This is what makes it. Okay, let's say this is a straight one. Now look at it. They have some very vicious thorns. I can move my hand that way, but I cannot move it the other way. So what happens is next, you catch Tim. No. You have to bend. I don't want to do that. You catch this dying goat. The shepherd would catch it between the knees and push the throat open and force him open. And then you shove it down slowly. Down to the throat, no problem, right? Then next you start rotating it and pulling it out. And the fat leeches would be caught on those thorns. And this is how they would save the goats. Spiritually pure, to be able to serve God. And as I explained to you, in Masada, remember those early Byzantine Christians that were disgusted with the corruption in the church's Byzantine period? Same thing happened with these people maybe 700-800 years before. They were disgusted with the corruption in the temple, and they left Jerusalem to serve God and worship God the way they thought is proper to do, in pure air, in a desert, away from all different corruptions. Clay vessels, pottery, according to religion, they absorb impurity. Let's say something impure brushed into it, a cat or a dog, you cannot purify it because it absorbs the texture, absorbing elements. So they would throw it and break away. Then they would be producing a lot of them. So this is the cheaper material that could be expended here. The more expensive vessels would be these, carved out of a limestone. In every Jewish home of fairly good economical situation would have few vessels of that would be containing water. These are the vessels that Jesus changed the water into wine. Okay, this type of vessels. And this is a water container. It contain oil, it contain anything, because this limestone is not absorbing impurity. It could be purified. Parchment, which is animal skin, worked and smoothed, and they would write with a reed, sharpened reed, and the ink would be juice, probably of pomegranate, mixed with two different types of saps. Very powerful ink that it stays forever. Those letters, the Hebrew letters that you see here, we call them the square letters, typical for the Babylonian period. They brought in from Babylonia back to Israel. Before that, First Temple period, handwriting was a bit different, actually different. But this one, every first grader today in Israel can read that, because this is the same of the last 2,600 years. Now, these people were extreme on anything they did, more extreme than the main Judaism, okay? So they were really taking seriously that business of purification baths that had to be what we term living water. Have you heard of that term, living water? What is living water? Anything but stale water. Stale water are in wells or in water cisterns, but living water are moving water. In some cases, the whole scroll of Isaiah, for example, 13, 20 feet long, discovered. In some cases, only a piece like that. But we were able to trace or to identify those 950 that they are unique. They are standing for their own. Okay, it's not pieces of one scroll. Different literature. Basically, when we divide them and we want to describe them, how we divide them, we're making roughly three groupings or three batches. Batch number one is all the Old Testament books but one. Book of Esther never discovered here. Is it because the word God is not appearing in Esther, or we just haven't found it? We don't know. But we found all the other books. Books of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, many copies, some of them intact, and that came very clearly when those discovered here. Those books compared to the Aleppo Code, and to our dismay, we found that it is exactly the same. There was a comma, a dot, maybe a letter. So this is it. This is it, the real Masoretic Bible. So the first batch, this is the Hebrew Bible, okay? Or maybe 200, 100 before, but we know that lived there many, many years before, and they all ended up here 68, when the Roman destroyed and burned the site. In that literature, we found the philosophical stand of life of these people. We found their interpretation of the biblical books. We found also what we call the one scroll, by the way, I didn't say that, majority written on parchment, I said. Some of them written on papyrus, okay, and only one written on copper, very thin copper sheet, which is it is in Jordan in a museum. And on that copper sheet, they have 50 or 60 hidden description of locations that huge treasure has been stored away in a day to come. So when they'll be able to topple the high priest of darkness in Jerusalem and exchange it with the high priest of justice or righteous here, there, okay, early Christianity. True to say, John the Baptist worked not far away from here. So there was maybe an influence, and we're talking about Elijah who was here, which is, of course, predating that period by thousands of years, yet the area may have something to do with things. So the site is excavated by Israel. All the caves has been searched, but there's always a chance, and sometimes we find caves in the deep desert, in cliffs of hundreds of feet, and shining through that you can see a building, white, on the very top, green, dark area. Yep. This is a biblical town that you all know, biblical mountain that you all know. This is a famous Nebo mountain that Moses came almost to the Holy Land. On top of that, God showed him the land, but he never made it across. Okay, Nebo mountain, straight up.
Here's the camel ride. This is cappuccino, and this is pistachio.
Where's your bag?
Hey, where's my clothes?